Okay, so we'll start with the session. Now it has been started, the live streaming has started. So, yesterday, if you remember, we worked on the previous chapters. That was like, if you remember, um, it was about P.B. Shelley and John Keats, isn't it? And
Okay.
yeah, and they were of the romantic period and of the second generation, isn't it? So today we are moving on to another unit, and we've also tried to compare also their works like P.B. Shelley's and John Keats, like the two poems. We tried to compare it and look into it, like Ode to the West Wind and Ode to the Urn, the Grecian urn, on a Grecian urn. Okay, see, these both we have did a comparative study also yesterday, and they belong to the second generation of the Romantic period. Okay, so today, again, let me just quickly remind you that it is BA second year, semester 4, and English poetry. Okay, so we are moving on to the sixth unit today. And let me tell you, we'll be going a bit slow because we've got ample number of classes.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So here we talk about Alfred Lord Tennyson and Robert Browning and their works. Okay, so what is it like? To which period they belong to? So every time we are talking about a poet as well as the period he belongs to, isn't it? So this is these are the poets who belong to the Victorian age. Okay, so before going into their works, let us quickly look into the features of this Victorian period. So, what was this all about? The Victorian age, named after Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom, and it was a period of significant change and development in British society. And if you look at the main features of this era, like it was like, okay, so moral and didactic tone. So, what does this mean? These Victorian poetry, okay, often aim to teach or convey moral lessons. That was one of the key feature of this period. Okay, and poets reflected the struggle between faith and doubt, right and wrong, especially in the face of scientific discoveries and social change, because there was a rapid industrial growth which was transforming Britain into the world's leading industrial power. So there was an industrial revolution at that point of time, and because of which urbanization increased and many moved from rural areas to cities for factory jobs. And also there were a lot of inventions like the steam engine, telegraph, and railways, which revolutionized communication and transport. So, then again, the next point feature, if we take it, conflict between faith and science. What does this mean? Poets, they grappled with the tension caused by Darwin's theory of evolution and the rise of rationalism. Okay, and because Charles Darwin's theory of evolution challenged traditional beliefs, so that was you know and there was a kind of a tension because of which caused by that. Then Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach is another great example, showing spiritual doubt and loss of faith. Okay, then coming to realism and social issues. Now, poetry began to address real social problems like poverty, child labor, and inequality. Now, that was happening during that period of time because, as I told you, it is because of the industrialization and industrial revolution, and there was a lot of urbanization going on, and and that there was a rapid industrial growth transforming the Britain. Then there were a lot of social reforms also happening that point of time, right? And because of which there was a clear demarcation of the classes. So there was a class distinctions also happening, like the upper class, middle class, working class, and so on, right? And so these were some of the problems which were coming in, and they wanted to address through poetry. Okay. And then next comes Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Tennyson, who explored emotional and societal struggles in their work. Right. Coming to the influence of romanticism. The preceding period was romantic period, right? What was its influence on this period, the Victorian period? Okay. So early Victorian poets were heavily influenced by the romantic poets like Wordsworth and Byron. Themes like nature, emotion, and individualism carried over, but with a more realistic and often darker tone. Use of dramatic monologue. This is one of the key features of this period. Okay. So I'll also explain what a dramatic monologue is. Okay. A popular poetic form during this time, where Robert Browning mastered the style actually, letting a character speak directly to the reader, revealing their psychology. So the best works of Robert Browning can be quoted as My Last Duchess. Okay, so I'll get into a deeper explanation of dramatic monologue. So now next, coming to another key feature of this period was rich imagery and symbolism. Now, poets used detailed imagery and symbols to explore complex emotions and ideas. So, they would, with the help of kind of imagery and with the help of some symbolic structures, they would try to explore some complex emotions and nature, light or darkness, and religious imagery were very common at this point of time. Right. The next, moving on to the next feature of this period was aestheticism and pre-Raphaelite movement. That is towards the later Victorian period. Now, whatever I spoke was towards the early Victorian period, but now here, this point, we talk about this the later Victorian period. So, reaction against industrialization and moral rigidity, and they focused on beauty for beauty's sake, art for art's sake, and they were led by poets like Dante, Gabriel Rossetti, and Christina Rossetti. Because if you have observed, this phrase art for art's sake was something like, people would always look for some kind of a profit, even though it's a kind of an art. So they wanted to inculcate this kind of an art form just for the art's sake. Somebody would really appreciate, should appreciate, without looking about its the result or the consequences, or what is it, the takeaway or the gain out of it or the profit out of it. So this is one which they have actually coined it, saying art for art's sake, beauty for beauty's sake. Yes. Next. Now, who were the key poets of this period? Alfred Lord Tennyson. He incorporated a lot of national themes, personal grief, for example, in Memoriam, you know. So, Robert Browning, where he was a man behind modifying this and bringing out a better format of dramatic monologues, psychological depth. Now, coming to Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who belonged to this period, brought out poems on love, politics, social injustice. Then Matthew Arnold, Melancholy, Faith versus Doubt. Then we have Christina Rossetti, who had brought out written poems on religion, love, sacrifice. Then Gerard Manley Hopkins had incorporated innovative rhythm, the themes of nature, religious, and so on. Okay, now we were talking about this particular feature of this period, that is a dramatic monologue, which they have fused it in their poetry. They brought out this form of poetry called as dramatic monologue in this. And this is what is dramatic monologue. A dramatic monologue is a type of poem which a single speaker, not the poet themselves, speaks to a silent listener, revealing their thoughts, feelings, and character, often unintentionally. And I mean, they don't have any intentions to reveal it or speak it out loudly, but they do it. And another thing is, there is a silent listener, a listener who will never speak out. And it's like by the way he speaks and addresses that listener, with that, we get to know that there is somebody in that situation, in that position, okay, in that place. So here it's like overhearing one side of a private conversation, and through it we get insight into the speaker's personality, often with a twist or darker undertone. And basically, if you look at the dramatic monologue, the features of a dramatic monologue, that is like usually a single speaker where the poem is spoken by one character. Then there is a silent listener. The listener never speaks, but their presence is implied. Then psychological insight. That is, the speaker often reveals more about themselves than they intend to, sometimes showing flaws, guilt, or madness. So, I mean, without any intention, they kind of speak. It's a monologue, isn't it? So, dramatically, they speak to the listener, the mute listener who is by their side. But unintentionally, they kind of come up with a lot many things. They speak out a lot many things, and in which they kind of exhibit flaws, guilt, or madness. Then coming to uh, dramatic situation, there's a clear context or scenario, often intense or emotionally charged. And another feature of this dramatic monologue is poetic form, usually written in verse and not prose. Now, who popularized it? The master of the dramatic monologue was Robert Browning, right? He did not invent it, but he perfected it. He popularized it. His dramatic monologues are known for psychological depth and sometimes dark or ironic tones. Okay, the famous examples: My Last Duchess, where a duke describes a portrait of his late wife to a visitor, gradually revealing his arrogance and possible guilt in her death. Now, please remember that we have this My Last Duchess in our textbook. We'll be reading it at, at a later stage. Okay. Then we have Porphyria's lover, and a man calmly describes murdering his lover to preserve a perfect moment. Now, the bishop orders his tomb at St. Prax's Church. A dying bishop reveals vanity and worldly obsession while pretending to be pious. And others who used it by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Example: Ulysses. The aged hero reflects on life and longing for adventure. So, even Alfred Lord Tennyson also had brought out this kind of a dramatic monologue in his writings. Okay. And especially in Ulysses, we get to see this. We have this poem now. We'll be doing it in after this. Now, Matthew Arnold, example: The Forsaken Merman, combines narrative with emotional monologue. Then we have T.S. Eliot, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, continues the tradition in modernist poetry. Right. Next, we move on to the poet of this period, Victorian period, and he is Alfred Lord Tennyson. And it's very well given in your book also. He was one of the greatest Victorian poets and served as Poet Laureate of Great Britain from 1850 until his death in 1892. His poetry is known for its musical language, deep emotion, and exploration of themes like heroism, loss, faith, and the human condition. So, let me just give you a key points about his introduction. So, born in Lincolnshire, England in 1809, he showed poetic talent early and published his first collection while still a student at Cambridge University. He became famous with poems like The Lady of Shalott and Ulysses. Now, deeply affected by the death of his close friend Arthur Hallam, which inspired his long elegy in memoriam. It was all about this in memoriam of this because his friend died and this he couldn't take it. So this is in memoriam Arthur Hallam. Now appointed poet laureate in 1850, succeeding William Wordsworth. His poetry reflects both the optimism and the anxieties of the Victorian era, especially the tension between science and faith. You remember I pointed out a point about the Darwin's theory, which has caused this kind of a disturbance and a tension, right? Now, raised to the peerage in 1884 as Baron Tennyson, becoming the first English poet to be given a title. Right. Right. Some of his famous works. Now, before going into Ulysses, let me also tell you a bit more about his works. He had written In Memoriam, just now we spoke about it, The Charge of the Light Brigade, Ulysses, The Daily Lady of Shalott, Maud, Idyllis of the King, a retelling of Arthurian legends. Okay. And he was quite an able person. His ability to blend classical themes with Victorian concerns, along with his lyrical mastery, made him the voice of a generation. His poems are still widely studied and admired today. So, today we're going to talk about one of the poems which is prescribed in the textbook for us and written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. So, that is Ulysses. Okay. So, I'll just give you a summary of this. Ulysses, it's a dramatic monologue. That is what we were talking about, isn't it? Now, this Victorian period, this is one of the form of poetry we get to see. So, it's a dramatic monologue spoken by the legendary Greek hero Ulysses. It's actually the Roman name of Odysseus, okay, who has returned home to Ithaca after years of war. That was Trojan War, if you remember, right? After fighting that war and after many years, he has come back home and um, he had come back, returned after a kind of a wandering. He had been to all the places all over and then he came back home. But instead of being happy with a peaceful life, he feels bored and restless because he doesn't want to come back and stay at home, isn't it? So, here, if you look at this first stanza, okay, it says about boredom at home. right? The first stanza, if you look at it, it says boredom at home. So he is tired of ruling Ithaca. He is no more interested in ruling this Ulysses, and he says that. And he even says that life at home is very dull and meaningless. I mean, purposeless. He doesn't like to come back. And his people are ordinary, focused only on survival. That is, they want to just live. That's it. They only want to survive. And they're just ordinary people. And he doesn't relate to them. He says he's quite ambitious and he cannot relate with them. And he feels like he is just waiting to die and wasting his time. That is, he being here at home, he finds it very dull. There's no purpose being staying here, and it looks like as if he's just waiting at home only to die and wasting all his time. That's the first stanza. Now, coming to the second stanza, it talks about the spirit of adventure. So here he reflects on his adventurous past and longing to explore. He says his past travels and struggles shaped who he is. So now he wants to kind of give a credit to whatever he is because of all the travels he had taken up in the past and kind of struggles he had experienced during this travel. That is what has shaped him up now. Now, to stay in one place is to rust. So, for him, again coming back and ruling the kingdom, being a king of those people, he says it's just a mere, you know, a place is to rust. That's it, a waste of time. And he wants to keep moving, learning, and experiencing life. He believes that life is very short, but there is so much left to discover. And he wants to kind of go around, experience, and keep moving. Doesn't want to stay back at home. One of the famous line of this I can tell you is to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. That shows his ambitious nature. Okay. Now coming to the third stanza, passing the throne. That talks about the throne. He thinks about who's going to rule after him. So Ulysses speaks about his son Telemachus. He praises Telemachus for being responsible, kind, and suited to govern. He admits that ruling is not for him. His son is better at that because he's not interested. He's now more keen on ruling the country. Okay. And he wants to pass it on to his son. And then he also praises him that he is kind of capable person and he's the man who's supposed to be, he's well suitable or well suited to govern the place. Now he decides to leave the kingdom to Telemachus while he sets out for one last adventure, right? So he wants to leave. So the third stanza talks about the passing of the throne to his son. And in the process, he keeps explaining as to why he wants to do it. And then he wants to set out for one last adventure. Next, the fourth stanza, if you look at it, here he kind of called to adventure again. Okay, in the last stanza, that is. So he speaks to his old crew, urging them to join him. There were people with him for some time when he was going around exploring and on an adventurous trip after the war. And he speaks to them and he asked them to join him. Even though they are old, their hearts are still brave. He knows that he is grown old because the moment he comes back, the first thing he points out is his wife. He says she's grown old and he doesn't want to continue being here. And he knows that he is also very old. But then he says, though they are old, their hearts are still brave. He says he has got that spirit, that kind of an heart which is still longing to adventure, to go around, right? So at heart, he's still young, but otherwise, he's quite old. He's grown old and he wants to set sail again, even if they don't return. Probably something might happen. They might drown, they might die, or they may not come back, but still, he wants to set sail again. He wants to go around. He dreams of meeting the great hero Achilles in the afterlife. Right. So here, Achilles, he's like, he mentions this in the last final stanza. He wants to see him. Uh, he's his comrade from the Trojan War, again, afterlife. He is considered the bravest and greatest Greek warrior in the Trojan War. Okay, and known specially from Homer's Iliad. So there his name has been mentioned. So he's no more. So he thinks that Ulysses, maybe I will set sail again, and probably after my death I will get a chance to meet him. He is a one bravest and greatest Greek warrior whose name has been mentioned in the last stanza. Right. Next, coming to the themes of Ulysses. Here, the themes, if you look at it, they are restlessness and the human spirit. So, Ulysses symbolizes the eternal human desire for exploration and growth. You could see, right? He was very restless. He just want to return back to this kind of an adventurous journey where he had actually been doing all the while after the war. Next, purpose and identity. Even in old age, he believes life should be lived with purpose, not in comfort. That is one theme. That's how he says he is not the right person to rule the kingdom and become a king again. And he says living here is like waste of time, and it's just like waiting for the death. That's it. So he wants to set sail again. Passage of time and mortality. The poem reflects on aging, but with a message that courage and ambition don't fade. So that is what he says. He says that he's getting old, he's turning old, but still, he says his heart is still brave and aspiring to go on a journey again, exploring the world, isn't it? So that gives a clear message that uh, the courage and ambition, the spirit doesn't fade. Okay. Now, next is leadership versus adventure. Now, there's a contrast between practical leadership, that is Telemachus, and heroic action, Ulysses. Right. Now, these are some of the famous closing lines we get to see from the poem. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in olden days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. This is one of the most famous lines of this stanza. Okay, this talks about the entire poem actually, right? Yeah. Now, next we move to another poet which is mentioned in your syllabus, uh, Robert Browning. Okay, so here we are talking about the dramatic monologue, and we already know and we've learned that he has brought out, modified it and beautified this kind of a thing, this feature of dramatic monologue. Okay, so coming to the poet Robert Browning. He was a major Victorian poet, best known for his dramatic monologues and deep psychological insight. His poetry explores human emotions, flaws, and motivations, often through the voices of complex characters. He was born in London in 1812. He got married to poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and their love story is famous in literary history. And he gained fame for his bold style, rich language, and exploration of morality, ambition, and madness. So, let us quickly look into his famous works. My Last Duchess. Okay, this is one. and where a duke reveals his controlling nature while talking about his late wife, which we'll be learning in a while now. And Porphyria's lover, a man kills his lover to preserve a perfect moment. Then again, The Pied Piper of Hamelin, a narrative poem based on a legend. Andrea del Sato, Fra Lippo Lippi, about historical and artistic figures exploring personal conflict. Now, if you talk about his contribution, mastered the dramatic monologue, where a character unknowingly reveals their true nature. And he explored dark and realistic themes, often in contrast to the idealism of other Victorian poets. Right. So, My Last Duchess, here we go with this poem, and written by Robert Browning. It's a dramatic monologue, as I already told you, written in rhymed couplets, A, B, B, and so on. Okay, they are rhyming couplets using iambic pentameter. Now, here, how does it begin actually, the poem? As I told you, it's a dramatic monologue. So you get to see throughout the poem only one person is taking the lead of speaking, doing the act of speaking. And there is somebody who's mute listener, who's listening, sitting and listening to whatever he's trying to flaunt and narrate. Okay. So the speaker, the Duke of Ferrara, he's showing a portrait of his late wife, who is the Duchess, to a visitor. Who is that visitor? Probably an emissary from a count whose daughter the Duke may marry next. So he might be an ambassador who had come up with a proposal. An emissary came up with a proposal to this man, for the marriage proposal. Okay, he would have brought some kind of an sort of proposal from another count, right? So, as he describes the painting, he starts revealing details about the Duchess' behavior. So, he tries to show that picture and then he starts revealing details about that Duchess' behavior. And he starts saying that she was kind, friendly, and smiled at everyone. Who? The Duchess, right? And she treated everyone equally, whether it was the Duke's gift or a compliment from someone else, everyone got the same kind of an, the smile. Okay, everybody were treated in a same manner. Now, this kind of a behavior annoyed the Duke, who felt she uh, should have valued him more than others. Why? Because he is the king. And how can she give the same kind of an the smile or kind of a response to every other person, just like the thing what the response which she gives it to the king? So the Duke then hints that he gave orders and now all smiles stopped together. So this is what he did not like it, hence he ordered. And then what happened after that? All the smiles stopped together. What does this suggest? That he had her killed because she didn't meet his expectations. And what are his expectations? They are so unrealistic, so gross, isn't it? So, kind of not apt and appropriate. Right. So the poem ends with him returning to the negotiation for his next marriage, showing a cold, possessive attitude. On the way out, he even shows off a statue of Neptune taming a seahorse. What does this symbolize? There's a statue. As they're coming down the stairs, they get to see a statue. That is statue of a Neptune. It is taming a seahorse. What does this stand for? That he is also of the desire to control. It shows that. So he points it out to the emissary, that particular statue. And it kind of reflects his own nature, right? Where the Neptune, god of sea, is trying to tame a seahorse. Right. Coming to the themes of this poem, My Last Duchess. First and foremost comes to our mind is power and control, jealousy and pride, objectification of women, appearance versus reality. Now, if you look at all these four, looks like they were the kind of characteristic features of that particular period also, the Victorian period, right? And the same thing has been resonating in the poem also, right? So the Duke is, when you talk about the power and control as the theme of this poem, where the Duke is obsessed with controlling others, especially his wife. He believes in strict social hierarchy and wants complete dominance in relationships. Jealousy and pride. The Duke is jealous that his wife was kind to others and not just to him, right? And his pride doesn't let him speak to her about it. He doesn't want to convey this to her. He doesn't want to even, you know, tell her that she should not be behaving like that. He feels it is something very low and very kind of a petty thing. So he doesn't want to check her. He doesn't want to correct her. Instead, he uses his power to get rid of her. So it's like jealousy and pride. Then objectification of women. So the Duchess is treated as a possession. He becomes so possessive about her. That's how he couldn't tolerate her behavior, right? And the woman, the Duchess, is being treated as a possession, not a person. Even after death, she exists as a painting on the wall. That is what he tries to show it to that emissary. He points it out, saying that, see, this is her portrait, my Duchess, where she did not behave in the way I expected her to. That's how she's here. That is what he's trying to. So it's like just mere an object. A woman were treated as an object. Next, and not as a human being, isn't it? So, appearance versus reality. The Duke presents himself as polite and cultured, but slowly reveals his cruel and arrogant nature through his own words. And that is the speciality of a dramatic monologue. I told you, isn't it, in the very beginning? Unintentionally, you reveal as you narrate about your behavior, unintentionally, without any intention, you reveal your nature. Right. Now, what are the literary devices which we come across in this poem, My Last Duchess? Okay, we all know this is a poem purely of the dramatic monologue style, where you can see only the Duke speaking and the listener remains silent. And there's another device called enjambment, where sentences flow over lines mimicking natural speech. I mean, you do not see a kind of a stop or a pause or a period anywhere. It just flows into the next and next and next. Okay, that's enjambment. Then coming to even not just the lines, even the thoughts and the ideas, which is, it kind of mimicking natural speech. That is what happens, isn't it? When we are speaking to somebody, it just goes on, isn't it? In the similar manner, you see the poem, the lines arranged in that fashion, right? Irony. The Duke tries to sound reasonable, but we see how controlling and cruel he is. Another device is symbolism. The portrait, control over the Duchess. Okay, the portrait resembles, what does it say? It shows that he's got control over the Duchess. And then the statue of Neptune is another symbol which he shows that his desire to dominate, right? And alliteration, that is repetition of consonant sounds in the words, that's alliteration. It gives a kind of a rhythm to this sentence. So notice Neptune through, though, sorry, notice Neptune though, and where the repetition of n sounds, right? Then you have imagery. There's a vivid description of the painting and expressions. Okay, there's an explanation, when you talk about this painting, he also tries to point out the way she blushes, and that too he wants to connect it with a kind of a comment, probably from Fra Pandolf, the painter, must have commented about some kind of a shawl falling on her, or the draped cloth which is falling on her wrist, and that could have brought this kind of a blush, which is why he's very, I mean, very possessive and very jealous about this kind of a behavior. Hence, so this is a clear description, the imagery we get to see there. Right. Now, how do we associate it with this poem, with the period? You know, the Victorian period. So, one is the male dominance. So, it reflects the Victorian patriarchal society where men held power and women were expected to be obedient and silent. Position of position and pride. Men often saw their wives as status symbols, just like art or wealth. Okay, class and authority. The Duke's concern about status and reputation reflects Victorian class consciousness. Art and culture. The setting shows Victorian fascination with art, aristocracy, and appearances, even if hiding darker truths underneath. So, uh, next we move on to block 3. But before that, I also would like to read some important lines, the famous lines of this poem, My Last Duchess. Okay, and that's my last Duchess, painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. So this is one something which shows how he now controls her fully, unlike in life. Okay. Next, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. So this is a kind of a very gruesome and a chilling hint that he had her killed. Okay, these are some of the famous lines of the poem. Right. So here, block 3, we are into the third block, and so here we're going to talk about W.B. Yeats and T.S. Eliot. Right. He was a famous Irish poet, W.B. Yeats. So we're going to start with Yeats. Okay. And he was a playwright and a Nobel Prize winner, considered one of the greatest poets of the 20th century. Now, look at this, from the Victorian, we are moving into the 20th century by these poets, if you've noticed it. Okay. And then his work blends myth, mysticism, personal emotion, and political themes. He was born in Dublin, Ireland, co founded the Abbey Theatre, promoting Irish drama and culture. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1923. His poetry evolved from romantic and symbolist styles to modernist themes in his later years. Okay, I also would like to tell you something about key features of his work. Okay, he was deeply influenced by Irish folklore, mythology, and politics. He explored themes of love, aging, change, spirituality, and nationalism. And he is also known for his works especially known for rich symbolism and mystical imagery. And some of his famous poems are The Second Coming, which we are going to learn in this session now, Sailing to Byzantium, When You Are Old, Lake Isle of Innisfree, Easter 1916. Okay, this one, which is very interesting, The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. This was actually published in 1919, just after World War One. So please remember, we are moving into another period, that is the modern period, okay, the early modern period after the Victorian period. This poem reflects Yeats' fear and confusion about the state of the world. It shows his belief that history moves in cycles and that the modern world is collapsing to make way for a new dark era. So the second coming is not very positive. It sounds quite, fearful, a dangerous kind of a coming. So the second coming, it reflects Yeats' sense of chaos and disillusionment in the aftermath of World War One. Now, this all started after the war. They couldn't, I mean, digest the aftermath of the war. There were a lot of bloodshed after that. And I mean, they were totally shattered. So, this is how they are even called as war poets. Okay. So, the poem suggests that the world is spinning out of control. I mean, it's going haywire. It's going out of control and symbolized by the falcon. You know, the entire world is symbolized by the falcon that can no longer hear its falconer. It's going beyond his control, out of his control. This loss of order leads to a world where the best people are passive while the worst are full of dangerous energy. This is what is happening. The best of the people are passive. I mean, they are no more vocal about their problems, they have just become submissive. But the worst are full of dangerous and energetic. They are leading the thing. Yeats predicts that a new age is approaching, but instead of a redeemer or savior, it will be a monstrous, destructive force. And he describes a terrifying, rough beast emerging, symbolizing the rise of darkness and violence in the world. The poem ends with the chilling question of his beast's birth, implying that a new terrifying era is about to begin. Now, in this poem, he actually expresses fear, disorder, and a destructive future. That's it. I mean, the entire poem, he foresees this kind of a thing happening. Okay. In the first stanza, he talks about chaos and collapse, right? So he opens with the image of a gyre, a spiral shape representing a cycle of history. Like he says, isn't it? Turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. What does it mean? There's a falcon which has flown too far from its falconer, from its guide or a mentor who's actually having a hold on that falcon. It's out of his reach and is out of control. This symbolizes how society is losing control over these traditions, order, morals, and they're all falling apart. There's an anarchy, there's violence, and a lot of confusion, which is spreading very fast. So the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So what does it mean? Good people are passive, bad people are full of aggressive energy. Coming to the second stanza, it's a new terrifying age begins. Okay? He Yeats hints that something powerful and world changing is coming, a second coming. But instead of the return of Christ, as in Christian belief, what comes is something monstrous. Okay? So something as per the faith and the thing, something good has to come in. But here, according to Yeats, he says what comes is something which is monstrous. Okay? Next, a shape with lion body and the head of a man. He describes a beast, a sphinx like creature rising in the desert. Its gaze is pitiless. So, this is what he is describing in the second coming. Okay? uh, which is totally, I mean, against the Christian belief. Okay, where we believe that something good is going to happen, and Christ is going to return. But this is what is totally, he's trying to anticipate something which of this kind of thing is going to happen. A shape with lion body and the head of a man, which is, you know, a sphinx like creature rising in the desert. Its gaze is pitiless and merciless, and it moves slowly while the world trembles. The symbolic beast represents a new dark age, not salvation but destruction. Okay, and the poem ends with a chilling question: what is this terrifying new force that is coming into the world? Okay, so this is one. The poem ends with this. Next, if you look at the themes of this poem, the second coming, they are chaos and breakdown of order. Okay, he presents a world where order, religion, and morality are collapsing, and he sees post war Europe is chaotic and dangerous. Another theme, history as a cycle. Here in this, Yeats believed in a theory that history moves in 2000-year cycles, that is gyres. With the end of a era, a new age is beginning. So, with the end of this era, a new age is beginning. Now, fear of the unknown future. This is again another key feature. The poem expresses fear and uncertainty about what the future holds. The coming beast is a symbol of violent change and loss of humanity. Okay, then loss of faith is the fourth feature. Loss of faith, what does it stand for? There is no hope or comfort in the second coming, nor, there's no return of any such kind of a positive happening. Only this rise of something very terrifying. This is what he is forcing. So if you look at the symbols of the poem, the gyre, that's a spiral, kind of a conical shape, where I think I have shown it in the previous slide. This is what it looks like. This is a symbol which stands for historical cycles, spinning out of control, change is inevitable. Falcon and falconer. This is a symbol which talks about the loss of control and communication between man and tradition or the order. Falcon and falconer. The rough beast. It represents a new age of violence, fear, and spiritual emptiness. Okay, then, okay, now I think we will stop here and continue in the next week session from here, The Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. Okay, I think we'll stop here. I hope you all understood this.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you are one studious student, Pranati. I see you regularly in my class. Yeah, I think previous semester also you were there, Pranati.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, nice to see you back again. Wow,
Thank you,
very,
ma'am.
yes, beta. So I think once I'm done with the session, I'll share all my slides with you. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, dear. We can close the thing.
Okay, ma'am.